Hello, hello. We are live and the camera's still crooked. So we're going to let a couple people hop on before we get started. What you been up to?
No, nothing.
Hello. Wave hello when you get here. Say hi. Drop an emoji in the chat. This is going to drive me crazy. So I'm here with Abby. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Ashley Brown. I'm a lactation consultant. And Abby works with me at Kentucky Breastfeeding Center. She's an occupational therapist. And now she's an IBCLC. Yay! She just found out she passed her test a couple weeks ago. A week ago?
Yeah.
Feels like forever ago.
Yeah.
And I'm going to let her introduce herself, talk about who she is, what she does, her background, and then I'm going to talk about what we're going to be talking about today. So, Abby.
Hello, everyone. Like you said, my name is Abby. I am an occupational therapist at IBCLC now, and then I'm also working on my CST. I finished Foundations in Level 1, and then we do Level 2 in August, which is really exciting.
That way I don't have to move the camera again.
So on the OT side, I started off very general and broad, as most OTs do. You really have to get into practice and then start specializing in things. So I always really enjoyed working with babies. So I knew kind of early on that I wanted to specialize in infants. But then feeding just kind of like happened. If you would have asked me in school if I would have done feeding, I would have probably told you no, because I just didn't think it was something I would enjoy. But we didn't really get much about feeding in school. So once I actually got to like see it and practice it, then I was like, oh, I actually really like this. So I started specializing in feeding. I started with older kiddos and then slowly started working on toddlers. And then I started working on 6 months and above. And then now I'm doing infant feeding as an IBCLC. I started doing like all the tongue tie stuff, and my son had a lot of feeding issues, so that just kind of motivated me even more to like dig deeper into how the body and breastfeeding and all that is connected. So
Yeah, so Abby was my first like unofficial intern because
Yeah.
she was actually Pathway 1.
Yep.
For those of you who are familiar with what that is. So she got a lot of her hours as an OT. And then we connected, and she mentored under me for about 300 of the 1,000 hours that she had to have. So it's been a long journey for her.
Yeah.
Of lots of years of work.
A lot of classes, a lot of mentorships, which I'm thankful for, but yeah.
The thing I love about having Abby here is being like, hey, can you please come look at this baby and see what I'm missing? Because for me, I just have the IBCLC brain, right? So I just can see like, okay, here's feeding as it relates to lots of things, but when it comes to like body tension, I am familiar, but I don't have the OT brain. So it's really nice to have somebody be like, okay, here's what you can do like in the meantime until you can see somebody who is qualified for body work. And for those of you who don't know what body work is, it's just essentially like, you know, your pediatric chiropractors, pediatric OTs, CST, PT, just people who are trained in relaxing tension in baby is just like a very general way to put it. So today we're talking about starting solids for the breastfed baby, and we're really excited. This camera's really far away, so if you guys are saying stuff in the chat, I can't read it, but I will go back through. We are going to have a Q&A at the end. We do have lots of, we have a few questions already from like my question box and my stories. So we're going to go over those questions too, but if you have questions, you can go ahead and drop them. You know, as you hear more things, you might, something might come up for you. So we're going to talk about starting solids for the breastfed baby. And the reason that this is a little bit different than, you know, like we're talking about breastfed babies in particular is because we really want to focus on protecting the breastfeeding relationship. And we really focus on trying to make sure that mom's milk supply is protected while we're introducing solids and when baby gets super interested in solids. And then another take on that is what to do if baby doesn't like to eat solids. A couple of my kids didn't really start fully until about 8 months. I would say that's probably pretty typical.
Yeah.
Had a couple tastes of things, but just wasn't really super interested. My first was super picky, didn't really like a whole lot of anything, and was really into the boob though. So we made it for a while on just breast milk.
Yeah.
But then eventually, now he's 9 and he eats everything. So it's all fine. So the first thing I want to talk about is just I need that. The first thing I want to talk about is breastfeeding and how to protect the milk supply when solids are introduced. So, do you want to kind of touch on the basics of supply and demand and making sure food is offered after nursing and just like the basics of starting solids?
Yeah, so typically for me, what I usually suggest is if you're going to keep your feeding routine the same as far as breastfeeding goes. Whatever that routine looks like for you, you're going to keep it exactly the same. I think that's one of the common concerns that I get from moms is like, how do I add in this meal? And what does this look like? Do I take away a feed? You don't take away anything. You keep your routine exactly the same. And you want to offer the breast first and then the solid. I typically will say give it a good 30 minutes and then do the solid because you don't want baby to be ravenous, but you also don't want them to be so full that they're like, I don't really need to engage with this at all because my tummy's full. So give it a good 30 minutes after you fed them and then do that practice session. And then as far as what that looks like moving forward, I mean, I usually say for the first, I would say 3 months, 2-3 months, just practice 1 time a day. You don't need to do 3 big meals a day. Babies don't need that much food. Even like a tablespoon of solids is like plenty at first. Really the biggest thing at first is just like exploring, accepting new textures, accepting new smells, accepting this new thing in front of their face. So it's just more about acceptance, exploration, and not really about calories. They're still getting their calories from you.
Mm-hmm. So do you want to talk about the perpetuated myth that food before 1 is just for fun?
Yeah, so it's common that babies, they should get these big, large meals. But in reality, they really don't need those big, large meals. I have so many people that ask, like, how many carbs should they get a day? How many proteins should they get a day? I don't calculate any of that. I have a 2-year-old and I didn't think about that. For me, I just wanted him to really enjoy meals. I didn't want him to sit down and be turning and pushing away and hated it every time we sat down. It is about exploration. When you get close to that 12-month mark, yeah, you should start seeing them intake more solids during the day. But before 12 months, it really is about exploration and play and really taking all their clothes off and letting them just get head to toe covered with food. Like that's the important part. And because they're developing fine motor skills, they're developing visual motor skills, they're developing feeding skills, self-feeding. So there's a lot of skills that they're learning in that too. So yeah, I don't know if I answered your question.
No, it does. And I think that a lot of people kind of twist that and think, okay, so food before 1 is just for fun. That means I don't have to give any foods.
Yeah, no, you definitely give foods. You want to get them to try a variety of food, variety of textures. You want purees, you want mush, you want lumpy, you want stick-shaped foods, you want things they can just gnaw. Like you want them to explore all kinds of foods in that first year or first 6 months, not first year. Because it's important for them so that when they get to the point where, okay, we do need to uptake how much they're eating, they're accepting those foods. If you don't do any foods and then you start even past the 9-month mark, babies just have a harder time. That window of like exploration is really like 6 to 9 months. That's when babies are just more acceptance. They're working on those oral skills, integrating reflexes, all the things. So when you get past 9 months, if you've still not introduced foods, then they're just going to have a harder time accepting those foods whenever they need a larger amount.
Yeah. So what are some signs that my baby might be ready to eat solid foods?
Yeah, so this is a big one because I work with, newborn all the way up to 12 months right now. And I get a lot of 3-4 monthers that are like, yeah, we can start solids. And I don't ever recommend starting solids for 6 months. Readiness, they have to be sitting up by themselves. Not just like I'm going to hold them by their waist and they can hold their head up. Like that's great.
Or
but
put
like
them in a high chair.
Or like if they're like in a high chair and their hips are slumped or they're like leaning over, like they need to be in the floor, pretty much supporting themselves. They need to have good head control. Yes, that is important. But like when they're on their belly, we should be like fully extended, looking around, full rotation, really good range and strength in our head. We should be able to like reach and grasp for items and bring them to our mouth. I also have read a lot of research because I know it's very controversial, but there are a lot of things that say digestively, babies just aren't ready for foods until 6 months. Even outside of maybe you have a super advanced baby and they have all these things at 4 months, great, but digestively, they are probably not going to be ready to break down those more intensive enzymes until they're closer to 6 months.
I think I also read somewhere that like those signs of readiness are also signs that their digestive system is ready.
Yes, exactly.
So like that's the biggest indicator.
Yes, yep.
Because what we don't want is, I feel like our generation, right? We were just talking about how like I was fed mashed potatoes at 3 months, right? So not by my parents, my papa. And I think it's important to recognize that like we are getting a little bit further along with the research and we know more.
Yes.
And when
there's like a research behind the reason. It's not just don't do this. There's reasonings behind why we should wait. There's more benefits.
Yeah, and we try to protect the gut as long as possible for many reasons, but our generation is just kind of plagued with lots of autoimmune conditions, and it's something that we are going to try to protect the next generation from. Yeah. So that's one of the steps we can take.
Yeah. Another thing you really want to watch for, and I get this a lot with if I've had babies that come in that have already started and maybe they're not ready, is moms will tell me they're just like pushing everything out that comes in. It's like anything that touches their tongue, it just like sticks out. That reflex isn't integrated yet. So that's something else to look for. They really should be able to accept things in their mouth without their tongue just constantly thrusting forward. Yeah. So that's another like oral sign of readiness.
Yeah, for sure. So as far as like when a baby is developmentally ready, or before a baby's developmentally ready, why do you think a lot of pediatricians recommend 4 months? Because I mean the AAP, does the AAP say 4 to 6 months, or does it say 6 months?
I think it says 6. I could be wrong, but I think it says 6.
Do you think it's just because parents are super excited and ready?
I think that's part of it because I do like it's new. It's a new thing. I try not to like crush parents' souls when they tell me they're like, "Oh, we started solids." I ease very into that because like it is. It's like it's something new. It is exciting. It's fun. Like that was one of my favorite things to do with my sons. Like I was so excited to start solids. I waited until 6 months, but I was like. At 4 months, I was like, okay, we're going to go ahead and start doing all these pre-feeding things. Like, I was really excited, so I get it. So I think that's part of it. I think there's also an association with the baby's going to eat more, they're going to sleep better. I hear that a lot. Mm-hmm. Those are probably the most two common things. I'm sure that there's many other reasons, but I feel like those are probably the two that I hear most often. Yeah,
I get a lot of parents in here who are like, okay, so we got the go-ahead to do the solids, so we're going to start that, and then they come back and they're like, the baby's not sleeping better. It didn't work.
I think also too, and nothing against pediatricians, but because I've been there with my son, it's, they're only with them for a short period of time. They have a lot of patience. But for me as a therapist, like there's so many other things that I'm looking at as far as readiness. When you're just getting like a quick outlook, you may not know that they don't have all of those signs too. So I think that could be part of it as well.
So you talked about like pre-feeding.
Yeah.
What are some things that you can do when you're so excited?
Yeah.
By the way, you have your baby's whole life to feed them, right? Like they're going to be eating forever, and they're going to be eating you out of house and home. So like, don't worry about it. But what are some things that you can do when you're like super excited and you're like, let's go, but baby's not necessarily like showing those signs of readiness?
Yeah. So for me, I always say try to eat together. So that's the first thing that I like to do, which that's part of is like always eat and model with your child. So even when they can't physically eat, letting them be a part of that experience and see it and like have them start to spark that interest. That's a sign of readiness I didn't say, as they start to show interest in food. So like that is super important.
I think a lot of people focus in on that a lot. Like, oh, he's ready because he's showing me that he's ready.
I will say that is common. Like, yeah, he's looking at it. He's ready for a bite. I'm like, no, that's great. That's a good sign.
That is one of the signs.
But that's one of them. Yeah. But then also I do a lot of oral motor, like teethers and toys. I'll even do them before babies really bring in a whole lot of things to their mouth, but that's very like I teach parents like use this if we're trying to work on lateralization or, they got a strong gag reflex that we're trying to desensitize. But I also use a lot of like textured teethers, textured toys, getting them to play with like one of my favorite spoons is the Num Num. It's small. You can like squish food into it. It's silicone. But like those short spoons that they're not going to gag themselves with, like letting them go ahead and play with those prior to even using foods with them so that they're learning like the boundaries of their mouth, bringing things to their mouth. They're getting textures in their mouth. So those are things prior to eating that I say start doing like 4 months. I mean, you can do some of them before. So that their mouth is prepped, and then just getting them involved in the meal that you're having.
So when you first actually introduce foods, baby's ready, 6 months.
Yeah.
Do you start with one meal a day? Do you start with multiple meals a day? Do you just like go for it? What do you do?
I usually start with one. And so say it's a dinner because that's just when. So I have a variety. Some parents are like, we do it at dinner because everybody's home. And then I have others that are like, we do it like at lunch because it's just me and baby, dad's at work, siblings at daycare or wherever. So it really is just what works for you. You can change it. Maybe one day do dinner, one day do breakfast. So they're getting like different kinds of foods. But I usually start with one meal a day and just like one food. So like for my son, the first food I did was avocado. I don't even know, we might have been I think we were having tacos, honestly. I think that's why I did avocados. And we were already having guacamole. So I got avocados, and with him, I mashed it. I started with puree. So I was like, we're going to start with puree and see what happens. And I used some milk. We were doing formula at the time. So I used some of the milk and made it a little thinner. And then, so that's what we started with. And we just did that one food. I don't even know. He might have got hardly any in his mouth. I mean, it wasn't much at all. The most of it was on his body because he didn't really have great like hand-eye at that point. I mean, it was just like on his face. I mean, he was trying to bring the spoon up, but it was all over the place. But he really loved it. He had a good time. We did lots of modeling and cheering when he got it in his mouth. So I recommend one time a day, and then that can like slowly increase. But just it doesn't have to be like a 4-course meal. I tell parents, like, honestly, the less the better because it's less intimidating.
It's less overwhelming. Yeah.
It's less overwhelming. If you put a plate of like three things, and it's like a big heap of this, a big heap of that, babies are like, whoa, like, what is this? So really the less the better. Start small. If they eat some of it and they show that they want more, like, you can give them more, but start very small. One food, because one food also is important as far as like allergens and gut irritation. Like, you want to make sure that you're monitoring that too. But
yeah, I remember when we gave our first sweet potatoes, he was up all night with gas.
Yeah.
I was like, this is not it.
And that's another thing is a lot of times you'll hear like, well, you got to wait a couple days. Pretty quick, especially with like a true allergy. Like, you're going to know pretty quick if they're having some kind of reaction. So you don't have to wait like days between foods, but you do want to be just mindful. I mean, there's peanut butter is the big one. And then you have eggs is another one. What's another one? Fish, nuts, dairy. There's more. There's like 9. But just be more mindful when you're doing those, especially if you're going to start those, because you really want early introduction of allergens. So if those are like the first foods that you start with, just be more mindful.
So do you have different recommendations for parents who are cutting foods out of their diet because their baby's sensitive to that food?
I would just tell them to be more aware. Yeah. Because, I mean, there is that genetic aspect, so it's definitely possible, but you just don't know. If there's a family history there, if mom is like, oh yeah, like I have a really bad nut allergy, just be more hyper aware that there is a possibility. I've had lots of parents that have come to my session and said, can we do eggs today? Because I'm allergic to eggs and I need to know like what this is going to look like. So yeah, just be more aware.
I saw a reel of these first-time parents in the ER parking lot.
Yeah.
That's becoming more popular.
I've had friends that have told me that they went and sat like in the pediatrician's parking lot and been like, we're going to do it here. I'm like, hey, you do what you got to do. I mean, if that makes you more comfortable, if you got to do it in your therapy session, if you got to do it at the peds office.
Yeah.
I mean, it is scary. I mean, I'm not going to say it's not. It is. But early introduction is what is key. And then if they have a big reaction, most of the time pediatricians will tell you to wait for a certain period before you retry, and there's kind of a process there. But
so as far as nursing first, why do we want to nurse first before we give the food?
For me, you want them to still associate that hunger and fullness with breastfeeding. Because if they do solids first and then they get full and then you offer the breast, they may not take a full feed, they may not want it, their belly is full. So I like to encourage before so that they're in their normal routine. They're showing hunger cues. It's time to eat. Their belly's full. We're going to give them a little bit of time, and then we're going to explore some foods. I don't know if you have a different take on that.
I think that that's a good perspective. I also think that it's important to note, like, the AAP's recommendation of either formula or breast milk needs to be their main source of nutrition until 1. So basically what that means is your baby's main food is breast milk or formula. So that means you give it before the food so that baby is still interested in nursing. Because if they fill up on solids, your supply is going to go down because they're nursing less. And, same thing if you gave like too large of a bottle at daycare, like they're not going to want to nurse at night, so your supply is going to go down. So we want to just make sure we are protecting the milk supply if it is the desire to nurse until 1. And then after that, it's fair game, right? So like literally the day they turn 1, you can be like, all right, eat all that you want, but they probably won't. I mean, realistically, they just don't.
No.
They're not super interested.
No, I mean, you have some kids that, like, I would say, like, my son, he started solids, and I had to really watch. I mean, he loved them. He just wanted food. So he was one that I did because like I said, at the time we were doing formula and we were doing bottles. And so I was still trying really hard to be like, okay, buddy, like this is still hard, but he just wanted so much food. So I think there's also those babies that you do kind of have to pace back because if they start doing a lot of foods, then you can see them start dropping nursing sessions or bottles. So it is important. Like you don't want them to like eat too much, but most don't, but you can see it every once in a while.
Yeah, and when that happens, you have to be mindful that baby's getting everything that they need.
Yeah.
Because breast milk, as their main source of nutrition, it includes fats and proteins and all the things that they need to grow in a healthy way, and the foods may not.
Yeah. Yeah, I had an older kiddo or baby that came in a couple weeks ago, and I think we're 8 or 9 months old, and we're not really doing a whole lot of solids, which, yes, we should be doing some. We weren't really accepting any. But pediatrician wanted them to do more solids. And so for me, I was like, yes, we do. He should be taking more solids, but like what's happening at the breast? Like, why aren't we gaining weight? So then we start looking and it's like, okay, this is something totally else that's happening and going on. So it's looking at like, yes, at that 8-9 month, they should have been taking a good variety of food. But for him, like we weren't transferring well. Our schedule was a little all over the place. So I told mom, I'm like, yeah, we should, but he should still be getting his nutrients from you. So weight loss wise has nothing to do with the fact that we're not eating solids. So I get that a lot too.
Okay. Sorry, I had a moment. I'm okay now. So we have some questions from our question box that we're going to go over. Is there anything else that you find important to touch on before we go into questions?
I don't know. I'm trying to think because I don't want to give it's a lot of. I think feeding is just a lot. There's just so much.
Yes, and we have an exciting announcement, so don't go away.
Yeah, there's just it's so complex. There's a lot that has to come to it. I feel like there's a lot of information out there. That's the most common. That's one of the most common things that I get is there's so much. How do I even start this? Do I start with purees? Do I do baby-led weaning? There's just so much. So I tell parents in general, there's lots of general tips. But if your baby is really struggling as far as you put them in the high chair and they're crying every time, if they don't like to touch foods, if they are continuously gagging on foods, if mealtime is just I dread this, I always say get in with the feeding therapist because there's so many general things, but until somebody really looks at your kiddo and individualizes what's going on, I don't know. I think that's the most beneficial thing. But as far as other things, I think once we say our announcement, are you okay? Um, but no, I think we can go to questions because I feel like the questions will probably have a lot of the things I was going to talk about anyways, so I don't repeat myself. Maybe.
There's people on the other side of the wall that are making me laugh. Okay. Okay. Yes. Yes to all that. Okay. When to nurse and when to serve food? What's the time difference? I mean, we kind of talked about that, like 30 minutes.
Yeah, I would say 30 minutes. Yeah.
Yeah.
Just to give them enough time to where they're not like totally full, but they're also like not really hungry. It's just like a good. Every baby's different.
Do you want to talk about like rice cereal at all?
I mean, I can. I think just in general, I just don't recommend solids until 6 months. So I know rice cereal in the bottle at 4 months is a common recommendation.
Especially for babies with reflux.
But again, digestively at 4 months, that's not going to be great on their little bellies.
Yep.
And this is also a little controversial, but for me, I feel like it's a little bit of a choking hazard.
Yeah, a little
because
bit.
Because the pieces are coming out in the bottle. So
yeah. It's really commonly recommended for reflux babies. Mm-hmm. And studies have shown it actually doesn't do anything.
No.
And it's more of a choking hazard than anything. And it doesn't help them sleep.
No.
Okay. You start with 1 meal per day. We talked about that. I guess this question means more like ideas for like the first food.
Oh.
So, which you talked about avocado, ideas for liquid semi-solid for 6 months old.
Oh. Yeah, I mean, I guess I can give a couple examples of ways you could just like modify.
I guess liquid semi-solid.
Maybe like a puree is what that means.
Yeah, maybe.
Yeah, or like a mash.
Yeah, and we can touch on that too, like purees versus weaning.
Yes. Okay. So I'll give a couple examples. So puree, if you're gonna, I feel like the most two common, you're either gonna start with purees or you're gonna start with baby led weaning. I actually do a combo. I call it like combination feeding, because for me, as OT, I want them to get as many different textures as possible in their mouth.
So I have heard that can confuse their oral function. Is that true?
With different textures?
Like with purees or purees and baby led weaning at the same time.
I've not heard that.
I'm not a feeding expert.
Yeah. I mean, I would say if baby has the optimal oral function to manage both, it should not.
Okay, so it's probably more
on, then I can see how it could possibly get.
Yeah.
That's a good. I'll have to look at that one though. Yeah.
I don't even know where I heard it. It was probably like a Facebook group.
Yeah. No, I mean, like I said, if they don't have optimal oral, which unfortunately a lot of kiddos don't, I can see how you could possibly see that issue. But I guess I'm very sensory based, which I do a lot of oral motor work too. But as far as feeding, I focus a lot on the sensory aspect of it. What was I? Oh, I was talking about purees.
I got you off track.
Oh, you're good. So purees is just puree. I know that's like a but it's like that really liquidy. Babies learn to like close their lip over the spoon, take their tongue to their palate, swallow. Purees are important. Definitely do some of them. And then you have the baby-led weaning, which is more of like you're giving them like a whole cooked thing of broccoli and letting them like gnaw and chew and learn how to use their protective gag reflex to push it out. It starts to go down. And so I, again, kind of do a combo of both. I tell parents to start where you're comfortable because feeding is intimidating. So if a parent's like, okay, when I'm just more comfortable starting with a couple purees first to see how it goes, and then we'll start modifying some texture. So I say start where you're comfortable. I also have parents that are like, we tried and they chewed on a big piece of steak last night. I'm like, okay, like that's fine. You just kind of have to start where you feel comfortable and where you want to start. So as far as like the difference food wise, so I guess I already gave you the avocado, so we'll do a different one. So we'll do sweet potatoes since that's one that you said. So sweet potato, like a puree, is like if you think of like a jar of baby food. Or you can, if you like to make baby's food, which these days I feel like it's cheaper with how expensive baby food is. But you steam your potatoes and then you mix them and you can thin it down with your breast milk. So then it's got like that taste that baby is familiar with.
I
So
always
that's
like
like your
that.
puree. Yeah.
That's also a good way to, like, if you introduce a bottle too late and you are looking for a way to get breast milk into baby, mixing it with their food is a good idea.
I love using breast milk formula, whatever, to thin out foods naturally. Because then you can, if you know, with that sweet potato, you try to thin and you put it on their tray, you do some preloading of their spoon, you let baby feed themselves. I'm an anti-spoon feed therapist. I don't like that. I want them to learn how to feed themselves. But they get some taste, they do well, and then you're like, okay, we're going to do that for today. That's it. We're done. And then maybe tomorrow you all have sweet potatoes again, and you're like, okay, I feel comfortable. We're going to do sweet potato again. And then this time you make it a little more chunky. So you maybe don't put as much milk in it, you don't mix it as well, so you kind of can grade the texture to make it different. And then maybe the next time you go more the baby-led weaning style and you roast a long piece of sweet potato and let them gnaw on it. So there's like different ways that you can modify foods for both of them. I think it's important orally and sensory-wise to do a little combination of both. I don't know.
Yeah. Okay. All right. So a couple other questions, and then we'll go into your all's questions in the comments if you have any. How do I prevent choking? And I think it's important probably to touch on the difference in choking and gagging.
Yeah. So first, make sure baby's body is ready.
Yes.
Make sure that they are in a good supportive high chair.
What's an example of that?
Yeah, so I'll show you like body mechanic wise. So you want them to be 90, 90, 90. So when I say that, you want their hips to be at 90 degrees, you want their knees to be at 90 degrees, and you want their ankles. So a lot of times I see these babies that have 0 foot support. So I tell parents, think about if you're sitting on a bar stool and your feet are dangling, how uncomfortable you are. So they are sitting there trying to like stabilize their whole body and they have nothing to support. So always, always, always have feet support. If the high chair is too big and they can't reach, roll up a towel, cut a box out, like give them some kind of support so that they can put their feet, so that they are supported and they don't have to think about their body as much and they can just really focus on, you know, hand to mouth and all the exploring things that they're doing. There's a lot of different high chairs. Really fancy, expensive one is the Trip Trap because it grows with you. It is expensive, but toddlers can sit in it. I mean, it really grows with you. I think the one that I used with Griff was might have been a Maxi Cozy. I can't remember exactly what it was. But it also has like adjustable footrest. You want to make sure that their back is up nicely. Like those like sling backs, babies are just going to tuck their hips and they're going to roll right out. So truly the first thing you have to do as far as avoiding choking is making sure that their body is in a good position to eat.
Yeah, I want to put a plug in for the IKEA.
Yeah. Oh yeah, the IKEA is good.
It's like, well, it was like $20 a few years ago. I don't know how much it is now, but it's got the tray, it's got the supportive seat, but you can also buy the foot support.
Yeah.
The footrest.
Yeah. If you can get one that you can move the footrest with, it's going to be really beneficial because you're going to be able to use it longer because high chairs are expensive and nobody wants to buy a high chair every time their baby grows. So. Nope. And then, you know, other things too, and these are just things that like, I don't expect parents to know this.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We're getting more questions.
I don't expect, parents to know these things. That's why we're here. It's because we want to support you. But if your baby doesn't have optimal oral skills, they're going to be at a higher risk for choking because they're not manipulating those foods well. They're not biting the food. They're just like mushing it with their tongue and trying to swallow. So there's like a lot more in-depth oral things that could cause choking. So if you continuously notice like your baby's just like mushing their food, if they're not biting things off, if they're pocketing food, if it's like a reoccurring issue, we need to look at their oral skills and figure out what's going on.
So for this one, we already talked about top product recommendations. We talked about that spoon.
Yeah.
Sorry, were you going to say something else?
No, I don't know what I was going to say.
Sorry, bad timing. Okay, so another question we got was really quick, like when to introduce water.
Oh, you can start it at 6 months. I think it's like you can do like 2 to 4 ounces a day. Like it's a very small amount. I don't even know if it's that much. And you can do that like with your meal. You can do it if y'all are outside and it's hot. I mean, you can do it. You just don't really need like a lot of it, because really at that point baby is still getting all their hydration from breast milk, so they don't actually need it, but you can, if you want to, just do it in small amounts.
Yeah, like if you wanted to introduce like a sippy cup or a straw cup or something, water would be a good thing to try.
Yeah. It's not necessary, but you can if you
yeah, breast milk formula, like they're perfectly hydrated.
And they have lots and lots of water.
What was that other question, Micah? Yeah. So, okay, we're going to talk about this one really quick, and then we're going to look at the comments. Have you been looking at the comments yet? No? Okay. It's fine. I'll look. How do I know if, like, my baby needs feeding therapy for solids?
Yeah. So I've said a couple things, but there are typical, like, flags that I tell people. So, like, when I've done classes in the past with a group of moms, I'm like, if you get a month in and baby, like, cannot progress past purees, we just can't get past it. Every time we do any kind of texture, anytime I give them like a hard munchable, which is pretty much just something that is long stick shape that they can chew on, that they can't bite off because they don't have teeth yet or the strength or whatever. But if they can't get past the puree, I recommend, okay, bring them in. Even if it's just one session for me to look and see like, okay, what texturally or what oral motor wise is going on to why we can't get past this puree. If we have excessive gagging, I know that in the, feeding industry, gagging is normal. A little bit of gagging here or there is fine. I will say I'm not a therapist that's going to let I don't like a lot of gagging. I don't like a lot of excessive gagging, because for me, I get a lot of kiddos with a lot of, they've gagged so much, so now they're protecting their airway and they don't want anything to do with that food. So a little bit is totally normal and it is fine, but if it's excessive and it happens every single time that a kiddo eats, they definitely need to be seen. If they're pocketing foods, if they've still got that tongue thrust, every time something gets in their mouth, they're thrusting that tongue up. What else?
You can, just fun fact, book a session with Abby if you're having these issues. You could probably do it virtually.
Yeah, no, I would say because I've done a lot of virtual feeding because I saw a lot of older kids for feeding, but with babies too, because what they do in different environments is different. So like I had kids that would come in with me and they would try all of these different foods, and then they would get home and they would be like, they would not eat any of it. So it is nice for me too to just see like, what does your setup look like? What does feeding, like, you show me what your routine is. That's what the first thing I'm going to ask you anyway is. So yeah, I could definitely do feeding virtually.
Micah can probably drop our, if she's paying attention, link in the chat. Okay, so let me look at the chat. Drop your questions if you have any. I'm going to look at the chat and see if there are any questions. When I need a second.
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely other reasons why you should, but I think it's beneficial just in general. If you have any doubts, if you have any fears, just do one eval. Get some tips, get some tricks, and then...
Yeah, for sure. Oh, it's okay. I can say if you hang around after the questions, we're going to make our big announcement. Okay. She'd rather breastfeed. Yeah. Do you want to touch on a baby that would rather breastfeed than eat?
Where they have like no interest in food.
1 year, 3 days ago, she doesn't really like eating solids. She'd rather breastfeed.
Yeah. I mean, it's so individualized, because for me, I would want to know, like, did we try them at 6 months? What did that look like? Or did we have a lot of excessive gagging? Have we just not had any interest from the get-go? So it can vary as to why.
Yeah, okay.
But I would definitely say if we're one and we don't like them, definitely get into.
So we already kind of talked about this. She asked if it was safe to start doing some purees, babies getting close to 4 months. We kind of touched on that a little bit.
Yeah.
This will be posted to the feed too if you need to go back and watch. Go back and watch some parts that you missed. See if I missed anything else. My baby being almost 6 months now doesn't sit with support yet, or even rolls over, or I guess doesn't even roll over. His pediatrician said he'll do it with time. So should we start with purees? I would say you can answer that, but I would say I would probably wait.
I would say if you have a baby that is gross motor wise, we're behind. and we don't have those signs of readiness, get in with OTPT to address the body.
Mm-hmm.
And then, because they've got to have that gross motor strength and stability before they can do feeding. So yeah, I would say start with the body, and then they will help you transition into solids.
So when should a baby ideally be sitting up? By 6 months? Is that a red flag if they're not?
Yeah, I'm not a wait and see. Like if you are behind, we should be getting in with therapy. I see it commonly. They get to 6 months and like, oh, they're not sitting. Let's start this. But I'm pretty positive that before that there were other things that we could have worked on to get them to that point by 6 months. So trust your mama gut. If you know something is not right, if you feel like we should be doing this and we're not, you ask for that referral. Even if it's just one appointment and then you're good, I think it's helpful.
Oh. Are there any foods to avoid?
Oh, like choking hazards? Yeah, I mean,
she might have some questions of her own.
Yeah, no, I mean, you definitely, so, the ones that you tip, like anything that's hard, anything that's small, anything, especially at first, because you want to do a lot of like stick-shaped foods because it's great for oral motor skills, but also anything that's like, I tell my patients like the squish test. So anything that you can take with your fingers and you can squish, they're going to be able to squish it with their gums and be able to manage it better. So you don't want anything that's like too hard where if they break it off then they've got this big piece of hard in their throat. So anything that's too hard, anything that's small, ball shapes, I'm trying like candies.
Does my baby need to have teeth to eat real food?
No, like it goes back to that squish test. If it's something that you can get and you can squish it, they can munch it with their gums. Chicken? I never did this with my son, but I have had lots of people, I've seen people do it, like would give them like a drumstick and let them chew on it. I did shredded chicken with my son. He was a little more, I did shredded. And meats are hard. That's the meats and vegetables both. Like they're just hard. And so with meat, I do a lot of binders, which that's going into like more depth. And again, I don't expect like parents to know all this stuff, but like because when you think about it, a lot of the foods that babies and even toddlers, I mean, my son does it too, like it's just a little easier to manage. They can kind of get it together. It boluses, it goes back. But like if you think about ground beef, you put it in your mouth and it just like, it goes everywhere. And then they're like, what do I do with this? So at first I did a lot of binders with meat. So like I would like mix some of the ground beef with mashed potatoes, or if we were doing tacos, I'll put a little avocado with the meat.
So it'll stick together.
And so it'll help it stick together so babies can just manage it better. But again, that's just like a textural thing that's but they do not have to have teeth in short. No, they can munch it with their gums.
My almost 5-month-old is still struggling with tummy time. Is that a sign I should worry about? He does have good neck control when sitting up with support.
I mean, it's good that we have good neck control, but as far as tummy time, does that mean like we're not, like we should be showing signs of rolling? We probably should already be rolling at least back to belly or belly to back. If it's like a low tolerance to being on our stomach, I mean, it could be a variety of things. I mean, GI-wise, what's going on? But yes, I would definitely see somebody just figure out why. If we're not rolling, is it a stomach issue, GI issue, or is it muscle? Is it tone? I mean, there's so many things that it could be.
Yeah. All right. Do you have to start at 6 months, or can you wait till after?
I typically say start at 6 months, even if it's just you're trying one food a couple of days a week. Because again, I feel like between 6 and 9 months, there's just a window of acceptance from babies as far as textures go. And I've just seen personally in practice and through some of the classes that I've taken, when you go past the 9-month mark, it's just harder. Yes. So I definitely recommend starting, even if it's like once or twice a week. If you're like, I don't want to do them totally, I want to keep this relationship. The thing that is hard and what I hear a lot is like, I don't want to start them because I'm terrified it's going to affect my relationship with breastfeeding, and it shouldn't. If we're just doing one food a day and we're practicing and exploring, it shouldn't change anything. If you start to notice things are changing, then we have to figure out, okay, why is this happening? What's going on here to why it is? So it shouldn't at all. But that is one of the biggest
a big one for me,
that I have from people.
So a question from earlier, she said he can roll to his side and has rolled from belly to back, just cries on his tummy. He doesn't tolerate it longer than 5 minutes. I'd be interested to know if he has like tummy troubles.
Yeah, I would wonder, especially if you've noticed a difference between like if he's on a soft surface, like if you put him on the bed, does he tolerate it more than if he's like flat on the ground? So yeah, I'd be curious GI wise what could be going on.
Yeah. Okay. I'm gonna do. Okay, we don't have any more. Good. If anybody has one more question, we can get to it. But we're almost out of time. So I wanted to tell everybody about the digital course that Abby has been creating, starting solids for breastfed babies, or just starting solids in general. What is like the? Just tell us about it. Like, what are you going to cover that we didn't cover today?
So it's gonna be. I'm hoping to like build off of it. Was kind of my goal. Yep. So I'm starting very basic. So this is gonna be for like those 4 to 6 monthers. I mean, you can obviously get it from before if you want to like really prepare yourself. That want to start solids and like don't know where to begin. So I go through. Gave you all some things today. I was trying not to give like too much away, but I wanted to give you all information too. But so I do give like a lot of that pre-feeding stuff. So there are like other sensory things as far as like body movement and like tactile expiration, all these fancy sensory words that I do incorporate that you can start doing very early on to 6 months to prepare your baby for foods. I will also give you more recommendations as far as utensils, straw cups, open cups, high chairs, just generalized feeding recommendations. Now I will say a lot of it is things that like I have just learned that I really like to practice with and that I feel like are good orally for kids. So everybody's got different opinions on that. And then I start with just like my general tips. Like these are the things that you start practicing with and start to do when you start solids to set you up for success moving forward. So like I told you all, one was like practice 1 time a day. My other one is letting baby lead the feed. So we're going to let baby self-feed. I think I have another one in there about modeling, about how you're going to help your baby model and signs that you can use. So just like very general, because feeding is very individualized. So I can't get super, super nitty gritty because every kid is different and every session should look different. You should never have the same session with every kid that you see. So it's very broad. And then what else did I put in there? So we did, and then I did give you a couple of like, these are common things that I see that happen. Whether it's like we start dropping feeds, we are excessively gagging, there's lots of other ones. So I do give you all some of those, and I give you like, these are a couple things you can try, and then if these don't work, then we need to start looking into feeding therapy. I put red flags in there, so like these are the things that you should look for if they're not getting better. We should come see a feeding therapist. I talk about choking, I talk about gagging, I talk about allergens, the common allergens and how to introduce those. And then I give a lot of different ways that you can modify your foods for baby. So I actually have pictures of, if it's a strawberry, you have the strawberry, and this is how you modify it all the way up to 12 months. So different ways you can to modify it so that baby's getting different textures. So I have all that in there. I have some resources because I've took all of this information is like a combo of courses that I've taken so many courses in feeding, courses that I've taken, mentors, so like therapists that I've got to learn from, practicing myself. So it's like a combination of all of those, and every feeding therapist is going to treat differently. We're going to have similar ideas and techniques, but everybody's different. And then I'm also doing an ebook. So you get my class. So I'm going to teach you all these things, and then I'm going to give you this big resource of all of this information. Mm-hmm. So it's a lot.
It's a lot that you get.
Yeah, it is a lot.
For only $79 for the pre-sale price. So the pre-sale is launching on the 12th. So, yes. Which means that if you buy during the pre-sale, which is a couple weeks before it actually launches, you get $20 off. Which $79 for like 5 years, 6 years of expertise is like nothing.
And I feel like I really am. Like I did a starting solids here, and I had a couple mamas, and it went really, really well.
Yeah, everybody loved it.
And so I really feel like I'm giving you all a lot. It is basic and it is general, but it's a lot of information to get you started. And then if you start all of this and then you're like, something is still not right, then reach out. And even if you're not local, you can always reach out to us and we can try to help you find somewhere close to you.
Yeah.
I am definitely a therapist. Like, I just want babies to be seen.
Yeah.
I would be happy to help you find somebody that can help you. So don't, if
Yeah.
you're not local and you still are like, hey, I think we need this, feel free to message us and we can help you find somebody in your area.
Yeah. So just look out for the pre-sale to come live. I'll probably post it in stories first, and then on the feed. So if you're interested, or you can just DM me your email, and we'll probably send an email out about it. And then the actual product launches on, I think, like the end of July, 28th, 26th, something like that. So then the price will go up at that point. So if you want it, you can either DM us your email so you can be the first to hear about it, or just watch my stories. Well, Abby, thank you so much for joining me today.
It's been so fun. Because like I said, it's just a lot. It's a lot of information.
It's a lot. There's a lot of stuff to learn.
Feeding is overwhelming, and I hope you all learned something.
Yeah. I'm sure they learned a lot. All right. So, like I said, just DM me. If you have any questions about anything, just feel free to send me a message, and we'll try to get to you. But thank you all for joining, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you all.